Do you want a behind the scenes look at the world of poetry? Well, then you're in luck because today I sat down with Tim Seibles, an award winning poet who's known for works such as Fast Animal, which was nominated for a National Book Award. His writing is known for its energy, its urgency, and its deep emotional connection to the reader. We talked about the power of words, the art of storytelling, and what truly makes poetry unforgettable. So let's get into it. What inspired you to start writing poetry?
Well, probably quite a few things. I've always been someone who thought a lot. And I think even long before I discovered the idea of writing poems, I think I always wanted to talk back to the world in some kind of way. When I was a kid, my parents, my father in particular, would say, why do you always say why? So I don't know. I've always had a kind of a restless mind. And when I discovered creative writing in college, it gave me a shape, poems became a kind of vessel for all this kind of madness that seems to reside in my head. So that's probably why I started. That's a reasonably short answer that is probably sensible.
And I completely understand that. I think my brain was the same way. I was a big why kid. I'd always ask my dad, like, if there was money on the floor, like a penny on the floor. I was like, why would someone leave that? And he was like, because it's just a penny. And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not a penny. And so I'd go into like my big reasons to him of why, like, I'd grab everything off the road and stuff. So I completely understand the why of it. And in college, same thing. I was in a creative writing class. I wrote a short story, which I had never done before. And I gave it to my teacher and she was like, this is really good. This is really cool. And I was like, are you sure? It was like the ramblings in my in my head. But yeah, it sparked a very similar journey for me. So I love that. That's so cool. Who are some of your biggest influencers as a writer?
Well, probably the my foundational influence would be my mom, who, when we were kids, she would read to us stories, poems, when I was a little boy. And she was a very dramatic reader. And that was probably when I first thought, stories and stuff can be fun. It's probably when I first started to sign on to the writing life, though I didn't know it. And so she would be a big influence on me. Her sense of how a story or a poem comes alive. Uh, and that would have been a big part of the foundation of my falling in love with writing. But in terms of as I got older and began to develop a style, people like Pablo Neruda would have been a very big influence. Now, of course, I knew him primarily in translation, so I can't say it was the Spanish, but I hope that I encountered some good translations that really opened up for me. So someone like Pablo Neruda would be huge. But I was a teenager during the Black Arts movement in the 60s. So people like Gil Scott-Heron, who was a popular musician at the time, but also a poet. I loved Gil Scott-Heron, and I loved how intelligent and ferocious he was about what he believed and about how the society worked or didn't work. And so that would have been a big deal. And then, of course, in the same period, Leroy Jones, who became Amiri Baraka, and then, other people too. Nikki Giovanni, of course, would have been an influence. Also, when I was in high school, my mother was very determined that I would have some understanding of the Harlem Renaissance. And so I
Mm.
read a lot about the Harlem Renaissance as a teenager. Those poets like Langston Hughes, Georgia Douglas Johnson, Zora Neale Hurston, of course, was a Harlem Renaissance writer. Let me see who else would have been in there. And then, of course, there were the blues musicians of the
Oh.
period, people like Bessie Smith, uh,
Mhm.
how earthy and raw the her song lyrics were. among others, but those are some periods that had a big influence on me. But back to the contemporary time, people like June Jordan, of course, people like Cornelius Eady, who was a friend of mine actually, but I was reading him before I ever met him.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so Yusef Komunyakaa, of course, who would be one of the elders of the poetry now. And then, I mean, there are so many people I love. I'll stop. I was certainly influenced by W.S. Merwin, that beautiful mystical touch that he had. I love that. Um, Man, there are just a lot. I read a lot of James Dickey as an undergraduate. Most people don't know that he was a poet because they know his novels and the movie that they made from Deliverance. But
Yes.
he was a great poet. And what I learned from him would be about how maybe imagery works and how powerful rhythm can be, even in free verse, not only in formal verse. I don't think he was writing any formal verse really, at least that I saw. But the rhythm of his free verse work, man, I love that. And oh, there's so many people. There's a poet by the name of AI. It means love in Japanese. And she was a big influence. She wrote persona poems, almost exclusively poems in the voices of other characters, other people. And that's why I started writing poems in the voices of cartoons. And of course, I've written poems now, of course, in the voice of Frederick Douglass, his wife, Anna Murray Douglass, his lover, Adelie Singh, and John Brown and other people. But I would have been the reason I started to pay real attention to persona poems. And of course, when you write in persona, you have to broaden your sense of language because you can't just write as you would write. Like I can't just write in my voice with my vocabulary. I have to expand my sense of what words can do and how they might be employed. And that would have been rooted in that poet I. And that's just a few. I could go on and on.
That's amazing. That's great. Wow. I love that idea. I think that anyone who's in writing probably should learn how to write poetry because as you just put it, like the different narratives and the different like voices you have to like portray to your audience. Like what a beautiful like way of getting your words out there. That's gorgeous. And I'm gonna have to look her up because I don't know about that artist.
Oh, you
So
should definitely
yeah.
check her out. She's long passed away now, but she was, I thought, like an immensely important figure. And again, I could go on for an hour about people who influence what I think about poetry, but I would be really important. It's just AI. Just put it up. Let's just put it in
Okay.
the thing. AI poetry. Her poems will come up.
And I love that you talked about also like your mother for your experience as well. I connect with that so much. My mom and dad have been the biggest push in my life when it comes to literature. I'm very dyslexic. I grew up with dyslexia. My mom is dyslexic, and her journey with dyslexia is very different than mine. Born in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of information about learning disorders at that time. So when
Mhm.
she had me and realized, okay, she's got some of the same, some of the same stuff, she was like, we're going to make sure she loves like the sound at least of reading, even if I couldn't personally enjoy the reading process when I was young. So, she couldn't read out loud to me because she was dyslexic. So she made my dad, literally made him, read to me Lord of the Rings. At like 3, 4 years old, he would sit down in the living room and he would read all the books to me out loud. And that became like our family ritual was to do that. So at least I could get an appreciation for reading even if it was, audio wise, if I couldn't personally read it.
That's where it all
And
starts.
absolutely.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I very much connect with you on that. Thanks to my parents, I have an appreciation for literature.
Oh,
So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, when you're a child, of course you can't read that well.
Yeah,
So
that too. Yeah.
if my mom had said, "Here are the books, read them," I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
my experience would have been very different.
Right. How would you describe your style of poetry to someone who has never read your work before?
Well, that's a complicated. I like to do lots of different things with my poems. I am primarily a free verse poet. I do not write a lot of rhyming poems, but my favorite form is the villanelle, and that's when I use rhyme. And I've written a lot of villanelles. But I like the formal poems, the villanelle in particular, because I love the way rhythm and rhyme operate together. And also, it serves to remind me and hopefully other people that poetry's roots are in song. Poetry,
Mhm.
long before it was published and written down and put in books, people would play instruments and either chant or sing pieces. That's hence we have the lyric poem because the lyre was the accompanying instrument in Europe for centuries before it became, a strictly literary form. And then, of course, you think about in Africa, for example, that you might keep rhythm by pounding a staff as you read, so you have that. So I love the idea of not forgetting formal verse. But free verse gives you many, many more options in terms of how long you can stretch a particular piece and the kinds of moves you can make on the page. I guess my voice would primarily be conversational, which is a marker of free verse. But of course, there are different levels of that. Not everything I write in free verse would sound like simple conversation. Some of the language gets a little bit more highfalutin. But what I like most about poetry and what I hope to have in my own poems is clarity and easy accessibility. I don't want
Mhm.
people to read my poems and not know what he's talking about. I don't have any idea what's going on there. That doesn't interest me. Being complicated is not, to me, is not a goal. It's always
Mhm.
about clarity. And the poem should be a kind of invitation to a reader so that they can get inside the poem and really, walk around and work around in there. And then their understanding of it is really rooted in how much they want to be inside the poem. I mean, you can read some poems and just have a nice, pleasant experience on the surface. And then there are other poems that you read the surface and you have to go in and think a little harder to see more deeply into the text of the poem. So I would like to think, and I hope that my poems are more inviting and more accessible to people who are not literary minded. I don't want only scholars to read my work. I don't want people who are educated to be my audience exclusively. I don't want anybody conceivably who walked into a reading to be able to enjoy at least most of my poems. So that's my goal. That's how I would describe how I try to work in poetry.
Well, I think you've definitely succeeded in that. I feel like I was very spoiled in Kauai getting to hear you read on stage. My mother was with me next to me, and we both were just like we were in awe of just one. I mean, like the way you read your poetry out loud is beautiful. I just put that out there. I mean,
Thank you. You're very
we
kind. I appreciate it.
we literally were like me and my mom both. We were supposed to be like eating at the time too. I remember because it was like at the dinner portion, and I was like, we both sat there and we're like, we didn't eat anything that whole time because we were like fully immersed in just listening to you.
Oh, good, good.
Your stuff is amazing. Not only is it so beautifully written and has such a beautiful message to it, but you are hilarious as well. You have just like these little humor moments that it's such a beautiful experience to
Well,
listen
I'm
to you.
glad you feel that way because I love to have humor in poems too. Like I have poems, of course, that are deadly serious. But
Yes.
I mean, when I was a young writer, I was very lucky. I had the people who taught me, in my earliest creative writing workshops, they gave us a range of poems, and some of them were really hysterical. I mean, I thought, man, and you don't really think about poetry being funny. But there are some unbelievably funny poets in the world. And of course, Billy Collins was at the conference, and he can be extremely funny,
Yes.
But there are crazy poems of all kinds. Russell Edson, asked about influences. Russell Edson would be a huge influence. I mean, he is long gone now also, but he's the craziest poet of them all. Russell Edson, Edson. Remember it.
Okay.
If you're in a bad mood or you're ever feeling down and out, pick up a book of Edson's poems. It's impossible to be sad reading his poems. They're just so crazy and so inventive and imaginative. They're not silly. They're really kind of ingenious gestures of imagination, but they are funny.
I love that. Okay, I will definitely look him up
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Especially like after being introduced to the comedy side of poetry from you, honestly, now I'm like me and my mom are both like we're obsessed with that now. So so thank
Oh
you.
yeah, yeah, poems can be wonderfully funny. Yeah.
What advice would you give aspiring poets who are trying to find their voice?
Well, the most important thing you can do, and this would be even for more experienced poets, but if you're just beginning to try to develop a writing life, you have to read. That's the most important thing. Find if you're lucky, you have some more experienced poets around you, and they can say, "Here's some books that you might really like. Read this, read that, read this." I benefited from that in college. But if you don't, even if you don't have someone who can give you advice to read, go to a bookstore, an independent bookstore preferably, because
Yeah.
I always want to support the independents. But even if you go to Barnes and Noble or something like that, go to the poetry section, pull three or four books of poetry off the shelf, page through them, see if you like something. If you like something, maybe buy that book or buy two of those books, and then really read them and see what they're doing. What are they doing? When you feel moved by a poem, how are they doing that? What is it that's happening that's making me feel this emotion or feel a certain way because I'm reading this? That's the important thing. For me, your best teachers are the books you read. You can have people who instruct, like myself and Billy Collins and Marie Howe and other, poets who worked hard to learn the craft. But the moments you spend with a book, when you're really in love with a poem, or in love with a series of poems, like when I fell for Neruda, I probably love all of his poems virtually. And there are others like that. Anne Sexton is a total monster. Lucille Clifton, another total monster. You could read all these people and just be amazed over and over and over. And I think, though, when we feel this passionate engagement with a poet, you can't help but absorb some of their sensibility. And then when you write, of course, you will not become them because they are them. But you might find yourself writing a line that you wouldn't have written had you not read them. Or you may write an entire poem and say, that's something like Lucille Clifton. Now, of course, you might not, it probably isn't as good as what she's writing, but it might have some of that energy in it, or it might have a certain gesture that you couldn't have made without reading her work. And that's the important thing. It is not unlike if you wanted to learn saxophone, you would listen to great saxophonists and you would imitate them. You would imitate them poorly, of course, but there were two things would happen. One is you would have a clearer understanding of what the saxophone can do, and you would have a goal to shoot for. I want to sound like Coltrane. I want to sound like Wayne Shorter. You know,
Mhm. Yep.
and of course, you may or may not get there, but by aspiring, you get better. And the principle is exactly the same in poetry. You read somebody and they blow your mind, and you say, I want to write poems like that. And so you
Mhm.
work harder, you read harder, you think harder. And that's how you get better as a young writer. And even at my age, you still read people who are doing things that you cannot do. And you think, I would like to somehow incorporate certain moves like that, or I would love to be wilder in this way or that way. And so you never really stop learning. You never really do. And if you do, you're probably done, really.
Absolutely, yeah. My mom said this, the day that you're done learning is the day that you're dead. Like it's just
Yeah.
there's something to learn from everything in life.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh
yeah.
Even if you're just going to the grocery store, like there's something to learn just around you in the world somewhere. But I love the way you talk about poetry and then like talk about music too, as we're discussing right now, because I grew up in Nashville and going to Memphis. So like for me it was like Nashville, Memphis, and Gatlinburg,
Wow.
Tennessee. And so a lot of music influence.
Oh, man. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yes. And like in, the blues and jazz and stuff in Memphis, my dad, like we could not pull my dad away from Memphis. Like it was hilarious. And hearing you talk about, poetry and having that connection to music, whether it's the actual instrument or somebody, singing, there's such a connection because I think poetry connects so much to the soul and music connects so much to the soul. And so
Oh,
it's just,
yeah.
I love the beautiful connection
Absolutely.
you make. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your experience at the Kauai Writers Conference and what you'll be doing there this year.
Well, I thought the Kauai Writers Conference was a blast. I mean, I got to hear some readings, I got to meet some really cool people. I did not realize when I was invited to come that it was as big a conference as it is. It's a very big conference. There are all kinds of people who come there. So that was a big thing for me, the chance to be there. And of course, the beauty of Kauai, Hawaii in general, but Kauai in particular. I mean, it's a beautiful place. The weather was lovely. I got to
Yes.
be around palm trees. I got to see the wonderful sea turtles, and other things that are just beautiful. And I also loved that there were chickens everywhere. It seemed like everywhere I went, there was a chicken,
Yes.
and they were so colorful. They were unbelievably colorful chickens. Like they were almost like peacocks. Some of those chickens
Yes.
were so amazing. But anyway, but the conference specifically was great. I got to spend time with Marie Howe. I got to spend some time with Billy Collins. I got to listen to people talk. It was funny. Molly Ringwald was there. I didn't
Yes.
get a lot of chance to talk to her, but I got to on the way to the airport. We sat not too far apart on the bus, and we got to say a
Ah,
couple words, and that was kind of cool. But the most important thing is I like that there are people from like many walks of life at that festival that I really dug. And again, the setting, it's hard to beat that setting, being there. And that hotel is a lovely hotel. I had a great time staying there. But yeah, I would have been content had I not had a chance to return. I would have said, hey man, I did this conference in Hawaii once and that would have been great. I would have felt extremely fortunate to have ever had an opportunity to be in
yeah.
a conference like that, but then to be invited back to teach a master's class. So I am thrilled to death, really, that I'm coming back and I'm going to be there even more time. I know the workload will be a little more intense too, but I think it'll still be a real thrill. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach a workshop on the lyric poetry, which is a poetry that's focused on the emotive life of the author, but not in the sense of navel gazing. That's not what lyrics are supposed to do. What they're supposed to do, I believe, is invite other people to feel with you. What you want is when you're writing a lyric poem, and all poems have lyric elements. All poems are about emotion. If you read a poem that has no feeling in it, then it's written by a bot or something.
Yes.
But all poems are meant to engage us emotionally and intellectually. And so this workshop will be focused on how do we capture what we feel in language in such a way that someone who may never meet us can read it and say, yeah, I know that feeling. I see that. My heart has been in that same place. So that's what I'll be working on in the master class, just saying, how do I say the thing that I really mean? Because most of the time, and sometimes we have to manage our feelings and keep them within. Of course, you can't be full on emoting everywhere you go, but we do it way too much. We swallow what we feel so much that we begin to think that's the normal state of our minds and hearts. It is not. I think a lot of the insanity that has shaped American culture in particular, but maybe even globally, is about people not being able to be true to what they feel. And so
Mhm.
part of what I think is important about this class is the idea that if you can write and find a way to say the thing you really mean, the thing you really feel, I think certainly you give a gift to your reader if they can share the feeling with you. But primarily, your primary audience, of course, is you. You're writing. You're the first person to encounter that poem. And if you feel a kind of completion in something you've written, then I think you feel more whole as a human being, and you probably will hold a little more firmly to your sanity in a world that, in many respects, is completely mad. And
Yes.
so that's the focus for me in this workshop.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I think that goes into all types of writing. And so I think that's why,
Absolutely.
yeah, anyone can benefit from that lesson because like for me personally, I write my debut book will be a it's an adult romance, but it's very like it's the sad adult romance that you read and you go, why did the author do this to my soul? You know, kind of
Oh,
feeling
oh,
back to it. So I would have benefited from this class so much because so many times when writing, I was like, okay, I would give it to my mom to read. And my dad, my mom is my medium critic. My dad is my big critic. And they're very blunt, and I love them for that. And and I would give them, you know, my chapter, and I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to tell them the message. I know the message for me. And then I would ask them afterwards, what did you feel? And what did you think this chapter was supposed to be telling you? And if what they said didn't match what I was saying, I was like, okay, I've obviously not given them the right perspective of it. And my dad is super blunt and he'll come back and go, I got nothing from that, like absolutely nothing. And so I think I could have personally very much benefited from your class. So you will see me pop in there. I'll be taking content, but I will pop in the class for
by all
for
means,
a while.
pop in. By all means.
Okay, so tell me about some of your current work. What work are you doing in the future? Give me a little bit of a vibe of what's going on now.
Well, we recently, well, it's probably been about a year, but we're still just introducing this CD we did together. I did poetry with an upright bassist. Kind of, there's certainly some jazz elements in the music and some blues elements, but there's also, you know, genre bending music involved with the poems, and we get it some experimental stuff and that. So that's one thing. The CD is called Something Like We Did, and it is available on digital formats as well. Apple Music and Spotify. You just put my name in and it should come up. The bass player's name is Chris Bridge, Brydge. If you put his name in, it'll come up also. So that's one thing that we're excited about and pretty happy with. I also just finished the next book, which will be called With No Hat, but that won't be out probably until after the next Kauai Writers Conference. I wish it would be available sooner, but right now it seems like it's going to come out in December or next January. Beyond that, you know, I'm always writing, you know, always trying to write new poems, you know, see if you can find the right song, you know, and make something happen. Beyond that, you know, I just doing the best I can to stay above ground, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I will definitely check that out. I have this New Year's resolution of mine right now that is to listen to more like more podcasts, more music, more things that feed my soul. So I will definitely be checking that out. So thank you so much for sharing that with all of us.
Sure, of
And
course.
thank you. And thank you so much for taking this time to do the interview with me. And it was such a nice experience to get to meet you.
Good. It was great, Haley Grace. I had a good time. It was wonderful. As I said, I didn't think it wouldn't be wonderful, but it was exactly what I thought. It was a wonderful time. And thank you
Awesome.
for your thoughtfulness and your care about, you know, my work and my mild madness. And I imagine I will get to see you at the conference. So this is not goodbye.
No, absolutely not. I will be there.